So typically what I do is I formulate an early game strategy. So my early game strategy is I want to look at my county and note like what I'm a part of, like what's going on around me. So you'll note these are the most important things right here for your overall strategy. These are what you are a part of de jure, which basically means like anybody who has this title, the Duchy of Seville or the Emirate of Seville in this case, can claim you. Same with the Kingdom of Andalusia. So what I can do is I can click on one of these tabs and you'll see what I'm talking about. Note that I'm a part of this duchy. I may be independent right now, but the person who is the Duke of Seville, or in this case the Emir as a Muslim, he's an Emir, has a claim on my territory that he is going to press. And my main goal at the early part of the game is to form this kingdom. It'll probably take about 50 or so years to do, but I'm planning on making this kingdom into my primary base of operations. And it is called Andalusia. It was a real, I guess, sultanate under the Muslims several years, I guess probably about 50 or 60 years before this game begins in 1066. So I want to reform it. And then after that, I want to actually create this empire, the Arabian Empire, which is sort of the classic Islamic empire. It was created by the heirs to Muhammad many years before this. I think it probably dissolved around 800 AD. You could correct me on that if I'm wrong. But that's what I want to do. Note how fragmented it is right now. Each of these represents an emir or even a king sultanate. So it's very fragmented at the moment. I'd like to ideally recreate it. And you may ask why I'm not doing Hispania. Well, the answer is I don't really want to mess with Christians. And that seems kind of contrary to the point of the game, which is that it's Crusader kings, but there's a good reason why I wouldn't want to mess with them and even really have any of their de jure territories, and that is simply that if I have too many of them, their areas or their kingdoms, the Pope will call a crusade on me, and if that happens and I'm not, even if I had the entirety of this kingdom, that's not secure enough against a major crusade for me to really feel safe. So until I'm a really significant power, like much bigger than even this, I don't want a crusade. I don't want any part of it. So I'm going to really try to avoid that. And the way to do that is to just not have a lot of territory that Christians claim. It's better, you know, for my prestige and piety and so forth to actually battle Christians, but doing that, like I said, is risky, and I'd rather unify Islam against Christianity than try to take on Christians as a smaller kingdom or even like the Hispania Empire. Because then I'm like, you know, if I have the Arabian Empire, you'll note just how unbelievably huge this thing is. It's probably the biggest empire in the game. In fact, yeah, I mean, maybe Russia, but Russia is also, you know, Russia. So, like, look at this thing. It's no joke. If I had this, I'd have control of, like, the entire southern Mediterranean. I could stage naval battles everywhere, and then I could maybe take over Hispania or something, and I wouldn't be afraid of a crusade. So that's sort of my thinking. I don't want that. So anyway, immediate goals. I'm probably going to get absorbed by this guy in several years. It's almost guaranteed because he has a claim on this. And you'll note that he has control of 6 provinces, which means that he can easily squash me. So I'm not going to fight him. I'm not a fool. I don't want to waste my troops. I only have 425 troops. He can have way more than that, especially in Seville, which is a large city. So if he attacks me, I'm going to immediately surrender and so forth. And then what I'll do is I will note that he has direct control over each of these territories. He's going to have to proportion them at some point because his stewardship is rather low. So because of that, he's going to have to, especially if he annexes me, he's going to have to take over. He's going to have to distribute some of these territories to his, maybe his son or like someone else. So once that happens, I will note who he takes on, and then I will send this guy, this Grand Vizier, to fabricate claims on whoever has it. And then I will use those fabricated claims to take over their territories. And once I have enough territories, I will then declare independence and fight this guy and try to take over this emirate. And then, from there I can take over stuff. So that's sort of my goal. So for now, I'm going to use this Grand Vizier to just sow dissent in Seville. The Marshal, I almost always have him train troops unless there's a serious revolt risk, or I'm really far behind in military tech. I'm not. Same with this. Early game, I always have him collect taxes. The reason is gold is extremely hard to get in the beginning. Overseeing construction is really useful once you're large and you can afford to spend a lot of gold. And then the Spy Master, I'm going to have him uncover plots. It's not really that important at this stage because, like I said, I'm going to be absorbed, most likely. And this is important for later, but you're going to want to remember that you can do this because as you take over areas, you can check their religion. I can't remember exactly where that is. Okay, yeah, so everything's Sunni up to here, and this is a Catholic area that's ruled by Sunnis. So for example, if you get a Catholic area, you want to convert it to Sunni. And the same goes with Shia areas. You will want to convert it to Shia or to Sunni, just so that your area is uniform and easier to rule. So that's important, but right now it's not a big deal. So I like to perform charity because it really only has benefits. And I also like to look just to see if there's anybody who's a little better. It usually isn't, but usually worth doing. And often there's like little pop-ups where somebody's like, I'm better than that guy. And usually it's always worth it to have a better person, unless they're like a close vassal that is a serious. You need to keep them happy. Now, finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about laws. As a Muslim, your laws are always set in stone, at least the succession laws. It is always this, you cannot change it. As a Christian, there's all sorts of options you can do, and you have a lot of flexibility with who inherits, all that stuff. As a Muslim, your eldest heir, or your eldest child, your eldest son, I should say, will always inherit. It's always male, and it's almost always your eldest son or your next surviving brother. In my case, I don't have any children, so the next heir is some dude. But if I were to have a son, that son would always be the next person, and he would inherit all of my titles. What this means is if you have 2 children, the second child will never inherit anything. So you will have these very serious pretenders who will, as soon as your guy dies, will cause you a lot of trouble. So, like, the first thing I do when my guy dies as a Muslim is I wipe out my brothers. I kill them all, and I do it with as little blood, like as little pain as possible, which involves few rebellions. And by doing this, it's extremely weird and it's extremely brutal, but it's extremely important because the key is there's this score, the decadence, and so playing as a Muslim in this game is primarily about keeping this score below at or below 25%, and it goes up if you have family members who are unlanded. Even if they're landed, sometimes it goes up just because of their traits or whatever, but they'll start to appear in this area right here, and you will have to either give them land or kill them. And that's basically your only option. The first time I played as Muslims, I was like, well, I don't want to kill them because they're my family, so I would give some of them land, and what would happen was they would get married to several wives, and they would have, like, 10 kids or whatever, and then by the time those kids grew up, they would all appear on here, and it would end up being this huge issue where I had to basically exterminate large numbers of people in order to get my decadence down. If you can nip it in the bud with a small family like this guy has, you don't have to worry about that. Your children can be I should mention that this only applies to males. You always want to have at least one. I like to have 2 males. I try to have 2 males at any given time, and then if I have any more than that, I marginalize them. Females are great. The only time that they're incredibly useful, you can get lots of good alliances going with them, and you can send them everywhere. It's really useful to have lots of women. Like, ideally, I'd have 2 males with everybody, and the rest women. 5 or 6 girls would be really useful. But that's not how this game works, and a lot of time you have to deal with a lot of males. And typically what I do is I will land only my heir, and any other children I have I will keep unlanded. I won't kill them right away, but I'll keep them unlanded, and I'll keep them unmarried, most importantly, so that they don't have kids. Yeah, so that's sort of what I do, and it's a strategy that is aimed at preventing large amounts of infighting and keeping this decadence level down. Which brings me to my next point. As far as vassals go, if I ever take over an area and I have only this amount of demesne size, I never ever ever give anyone in my family other than my heir land. So I'll take somebody from my court who is unrelated to me, and I'll give them land, and that way my vassals don't increase my decadence. I also keep them. I only give them 1 piece of land. So if I were to create a duchy, for example, I would give the duke the primary thing, but he would have a count under him so that I could undermine his authority. It's all about. This game is all about. It's very, very interesting. It's all about just keeping your vassals hopping, basically. Now, let's continue on with what I was doing. I'm going to just look at technology. I like to increase siege equipment first because sieges take forever. So let's do that. Economy. Construction is the lowest, and it's pretty useful. So let's focus on that. Culture. All of it's pretty good. I guess let's do local noble customs. That sounds fine. Doesn't really matter that much. Military, notice I can only raise, this many troops. It's not very many. You can hire mercenaries. It's extremely useful at certain points in the game, but they're way too expensive for me at this point, and I am not going to need them, most likely. I may need them in certain situations, but as a Christian they're really useful, but as a Muslim they're not as useful. And then you can, create a new guy, create a new girl, invite a holy man. So if you need more people in your court, you can do that. It costs some money. Here is a situation where you can send in 3 gold and get 25 piety and a better rating with the Caliph, who's the head of the Sunni faith. I'm going to do that, actually, because piety as a Muslim is incredibly useful. Diplomacy I've showed you, religion I've showed you, and characters I've showed you. So we are actually ready to begin.